today, so I work in advanced analytics, meaning I work with tools such as Microsoft Power BI, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I also work with other tools, and in fact, I know this is the Coding Academy. I also work with the R statistical language, and I am going to be demonstrating how R can be used in together with Power BI. So very warm welcome, everybody. I'm going to be talking about a range of topics, and included in those discussions, I have some Slidos. Have you worked with Slido before? I think you have. Is that correct? Feel free to use the chat if you'd like to make a comment. Anyway, you'll get used to it. As long as you've got a mobile phone with you, you'll be able to join in. Wonderful. Thank you for the confirmation. Thanks, everybody. So we're going to be looking at, we're going to be starting off talking about why would we want to visualize data. And then we'll also talk about some best practices in visualizing data. Power BI, I'll give the secret away, is all about visualizing and understanding data. And then I'll give you a live demonstration of the use of Power BI to be able to connect to data, to clean data, use different types of visual elements. I'll build up a visualization during the session, and how to share those visual elements. And last but not least, I will demonstrate how Power BI can be used together with R, but you may be more familiar with Python. Is there anyone here who is actually an R using R, the programming language R? Imagine.
I believe I've used it through my master's studies.
More Python,
developing. No, I've been using R language through RStudio. Yeah.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, what we're going to see is that we can use R inside of Power BI as well. So yeah, I see Shaker says more Python, and also let me expand the chat box here. One moment, so I can see the full chat. So some of you have, but more familiarity with Python, which is kind of what I expected. All right, so let's get started on the topic of why would we visualize data. And to get that discussion going, I'd like to show you this, which is data about the 19th century, 18th, 19th century Emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, who made an attempt to take over Moscow with his army. And this is some data about his army. What I'd like to do, this is the first Slido, is for you to give me your view on how easy it is to interpret this data. So if the first entry into Slido, use your the QR code or go to slido.com with the code 228005. And let me know if you think it's very easy to interpret this data, then give it a 5. If you don't think it's easy to interpret this data, then you can give it a 1. So I'll just wait for, let's see, we've got 1 person in, 2 people in. I think Hannah said we're with about 30 people, so we should have a few of you. Once again, use your phone with the QR code if you'd like to rate how easy it is to interpret this data. Oh, it says there is no such event right now. Is anyone else having that same issue? I can see we have 3 people in. If that happens, I'm afraid it's going to be just the few. Same issue. Is that using the QR code or with the slido.com 228005? With the number. Okay. So this class is about using the tool Power BI and about data visualization in general. So Nadia says the QR code works. So if you're able with your phone to work with the QR code, from the QR code, let me just see, is it possible to actually, is the code maybe incorrect? I see we have 5 people now who've responded. 6, so some of you are coming in. I'm not going to be able to change that code for the moment. So if you aren't, a few more coming in, that's lovely. 8 people. On the question of ease of. Okay, that's great. Thanks, everybody. If you're using the QR code, that seems to be the way to go. I'll just give it another few seconds and we'll see what your views are on the ease of interpreting this data. Still a few coming in. Can't stop on 13th. 14, great stuff. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, still some more coming in. Let's see what you think. So interestingly, you're smarter than I am because majority of you saying 5, which means you find it easy to interpret the data. Although quite a few of you, 42%, that's 18 plus the 24, saying not so easy. So in fact, I personally, if I look at that data, can anyone say, let's say just off the top of your head, how many people started the march? So they started with an army, they got to Moscow, and then they had to retreat. They came back. Does anyone have a sense of approximately what proportion of people came back from Moscow? Personally, I don't find it super easy. So we're actually exactly split. Some of you love the spreadsheet. So we've got 44 and 44 of you, also 44% also saying 1 star, 2 star, not so easy. Let me then, this is a visualization that was put together in the 1860s. And what this is doing is representing the start of the campaign with the light brown line representing, or the march from, actually it was Lithuania, going from Lithuania to Moscow. And then the return is the black line. And the thickness of the line represents how many people were in the army at that, while they were either going to Moscow or returning from Moscow. What can you see in terms of the number of people that returned from Moscow? Does it look like many or few? So if we say at this point, back in Lithuania, which is over on the left side, the black line is the line representing the people who returned. What would you say? It's many people or few people that returned? Shaker says few. What do others think? Also says few. So that's what we can see. Now, in terms of the ease of interpreting the spreadsheet or this visual, which one do you think is easier to interpret? The spreadsheet? So easier to interpret, easier to understand what's going on with the data, the spreadsheet or the map? What would you say? Okay, Sheikh says spreadsheet, majority of spreadsheet people. Okay, so I'm going to have to persuade you that data visualizations make it easier. So let me ask this question back with Slido. What percentage of the army returned to Lithuania compared to the original army size? What do you think, just based on the lines? 12%, 2%, 32%, 22%. Okay, Shaker thinks 12%. Thinking about the thickness of that line, the black line compared with the brown line. see if I'm able to switch back without damaging. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay, let's see what you think overall. Anyone else still coming in? Let's see. So most of you correctly interpreted that only about 2% of the army returned. If we come back to the map, you can see a very thick line actually representing 420,000 troops that set out, and in fact only 10,000 returned. If we go back to the spreadsheet, we can actually see that because it's these two rows of data, 422,000 who started out on the march and 10,000 who returned. All right, so the purpose of the data visualization is to make it easier to go back to the right screen. It's trying to make it easier and quicker to convey messages. And very often in business, there are some communities who like the spreadsheets. Let's say the finance community might like the spreadsheets, but there are many others, sales, marketing, maybe human capital, who find it more difficult to actually interpret a spreadsheet and rather see data visualized. All right, now in terms of data visualization, traditionally, we've worked with tools like PowerPoint and Excel. How many of you have actually put together presentations using PowerPoint and Excel? I see Pradjit has, and lots of people saying, yeah, everybody. That's something very common. How about, and then there are a range of tools, and one of which is the one we're going to be looking at today, but there are others. There's a tool called Qlik, Plotly, Tableau. Have anyone worked with any one of these tools? So Reham has worked with Power BI, so several, also Tableau users use Tableau a lot for analytics. Nadia, Power BI. Tableau as data scientist students, and Plotly and Dash. Aha, fantastic. Okay, so what is the difference? For those of you that have worked with both, for those of you that have worked putting presentations together with PowerPoint and Excel, and those of you that have worked with presentations maybe using Power BI or Tableau, what is the difference, would you say? What difference does it make? Power BI is interactive, absolutely. Excel, pivot, dashboard, more flexible. So it's certainly easier to get up to speed with Excel. That would be fair to say. But as Reham says, Power BI is interactive. And Amna says powerful integration. Amna, are you meaning integration of the data, instantly connecting to the data? Deepak says you're unable to do editing in Tableau, rows and columns. Yeah, it is. When you've worked a lot with Excel and you want to be able to kind of right click on a row or column in Tableau, that can be tricky. Mohammed asks if we'll share the recording afterwards, and I think that is going to be the case. Hannah, are you able to confirm that? If Hannah's with us, I'm sure we can. I'm sure that's part of what is done. All right, so we have this range of tools available to us, and the one we're going to be focusing on today is, as mentioned, Power BI. So Power BI is, going to Wikipedia, an interactive data visualization software product from Microsoft, and it has a primary focus on business intelligence. And many companies in around the world are using Power BI, and actually. Let me send you a link to some research that I do looking at the job site Indeed. So I'll just put this link into the chat so you can have a look at it yourselves. Let me just show you this link. And this indeed is created in Power BI. So if you've not worked with Power BI before, this is the chance. So I'm going to change. This is looking at South Africa and the United Arab Emirates. And so in the period, the 11th of July through to the 28th of July, these are companies that have advertised job postings, which are looking for Power BI. All right, so it's very widely used. If I would look at Tableau, for instance, Tableau, slightly shorter list from Tableau. Power BI is becoming increasingly popular because it is part of the Microsoft 365 suite of tools. All right, so, and I will show you shortly where you can actually download Power BI. So the benefit of using such tools are, number one, that we can take data from different sources. We could take it maybe from a SQL database. We can take it just from an Excel sheet. We can get into web data, and I'm going to be demonstrating that shortly. So we can take data from multiple sites and we can actually join them together. Are there any SQL programmers with us this morning? Anyone using SQL? Knowing about data joins in SQL, inner joins, left joins, right joins, Deepak is, yeah. So we can, of course, program a join. You can also write in Power BI, you can write SQL directly to make a connection. But you're also able to, if you prefer more of a drag and drop interface, you can use the Power BI to make the joins. So not relying necessarily on writing SQL code to be able to join multiple tables together. So that's the first one. We can work with multiple data sources in terms of connecting to data. The other thing that then is possible is that reports can be generated by non-technical users. So in the past, if you go back maybe 20 years in a large corporation, if you wanted some kind of report, you could either create it in Excel, but then you've got the manual process of updating it every month, or you could get automated reports, but you'd have to go to the IT department and ask them to create the report, and it would then be emailed to you, or even back in the beginning of my career, it would come off a printer in the morning. So now with Power BI, we can create reports as non-technical people. Okay. And those reports, let me ask you this, for those of you that have worked in PowerPoint and Excel for creating reports, how quickly, if you want to refresh and update the report, how long does that take you? Maybe a couple of hours, maybe a day? How long do you find, if you're creating reports in Excel and PowerPoint, does it take you to prepare a report? What would you say? It takes a long time. Pradjit says it takes a long time. What about others? Yeah, it takes hours, absolutely. And this, for me, is one of the reasons I love Power BI and Tableau, by the way, because once you have set up the report, you've made the data connections, you've formatted the report, then the next time the data refreshes, it is instantaneous. There is no work to be done. I had a friend when I was a teenager who said, give a lazy man a job to do and he'll find an easy way to do it. And this, for me, it just stops you having to spend all that time. And Ellie, you're right to say with macros, you could speed up the process. Absolutely right. But in general, you've still got to open it, run the macros, which is something you're not going to have to do with Power BI or Tableau. The other thing that you can do is that the reports can be formatted to be able to work on multiple devices. So you can format for mobile, you can format for desktop. If you know your audience, you can make sure, if you want to do it for mobile, it's much easier. Would you say, how well would you rate PowerPoint reporting for mobile? Would you say 1, not good, or 5, really good? How would you rate reading PowerPoint slides on a mobile phone? Ellie says 1. Shaker says 3. So mostly skewing on the side of the lower side, not that great, right? Whereas with Power BI, you can publish, and you can publish in such a way that it is designed for a mobile interface. Next point, you can also, once we publish a data visualization in Power BI, you can publish that to groups of people, and there is a facility once you publish, for instance, for colleagues to add comments. So you can start a conversation, which, you know, if you've emailed a report in PowerPoint to a group of people, there's no single forum, apart from reply all, let's say, for sharing the comments, whereas that is built in to Power BI. By the way, I don't work for Microsoft. I've got no skin in the game, as they say. It's just, I'm a big believer, having gone through the PowerPoint and Excel way of working. I'm a big believer in the use of these BI tools. And the other one that we can do is we can explore visualizations for a broader and deeper understanding. And when I say explore, let me send you right now another link, which is to a visualization, which is coming up on the screen any moment. So I'm going to send you this the link to this visualization. So drop that in right now. This is a visualization that was created in PowerPoint. Sorry, in Tableau. Let me just bring up the chat. Where's the chat box gone? Oops. Here's the chat. Okay, let me put that in there. So if you'd like to go into that visualization, we're going to do a quick quiz on this one as well in Slido. So just if you could let me know that you have managed to open up this visualization. So if you do that, let me open it up as well. Great, it's open. And this, has anyone gone to Tableau Public before, by the way? So Tableau Public is a free version of Tableau, and you can actually display. Okay, Deepak has gone to Tableau Public. You like it, Deepak? Is it? Are you a fan? All right. So what you see here, yeah, it's good. It's good, and it's free. What's not to like if it's free, right? So what you can see here on the point of being able to interact with data, if we look at PowerPoint and Excel forms, they're static, right? Whereas with this, with Tableau or Power BI, you're able to, for instance, look at the data by, and it's not coming on the screen, my small screen very well, but you can see the data by gender, by country of birth. And each of these bars is representing the person who was the oldest person in the world at the time. Caveat, you're absolutely right. It has some very, very cool visualizations. All right. So keep that screen open if you're able to. And then at the same time, what I'd like you to do is to, let's return to Slido. And there are a couple, if you go in now to Slido, you should have a couple of questions about data in this visualization. Are those two questions showing for you? We're doing a poll. Mohammed, is that okay? So are you able to see the poll? Yeah, okay. So if you'd like to answer the two questions about which come from that visualization. So explore, no problem, Mohammed, no problem at all. I thought you wanted to say something. So explore that visualization and see if you can answer the two questions in this poll. Is anyone giving that a go? Still haven't, obviously you've got to interact with the data, work out the answers. Okay. One person is in. So use the filter, which is here, to be able to get a different view of the data, and that will help you to answer the questions. So 2 people in. Anyone else having a go? Four, looking through. And what I'm demonstrating here is the fact that you can interact with the data, which is different than the static reports that you would create, for instance, using Excel and PowerPoint. May not be so easy if you're joining us from mobile. The Tableau might not be so easy. Oh, still people coming in. Lovely. Still, we'll just give it another few seconds to see if everybody was able to get at the answers. All right, let's have a look. And correctly answered by the majority. How many men have held the oldest person record? There were 5, so majority of you getting that one right. Fantastic. And then the second question, in which decade was Jean Calment born? One of the holders of the record, the oldest person, and that indeed, vast majority of you getting that right, 71%. So when we talk about tools like Power BI, like Tableau, being interactive, this is what we mean. You can use filters, you can hover over the data, you can interact with the data. Which do you think is a more pleasurable experience for reading a report? A static report like Excel and PowerPoint, or a dynamic report? What do you think? Static or dynamic? Which is more stimulating and interesting? Mahat says dynamic. Nadia says dynamic. We're all agreeing, of course. Deepak, of course. All right, so this is one of the big advantages of the tools such as Power BI, is that we have the ability to explore the visualizations and get a deeper understanding. Okay. So, next question on Slido. What I'd now like to talk about is some best practices around visualizing data. And the first one I'd like you to look at is this one. There are 2 visuals being displayed. I'd like you to say 3 visuals being displayed. I'd like you to say which one do you think is the most honest representation of the data. And there's an earlier question asking, do you think you're looking in all 3 cases? Are you looking at the same data or different data? So 2 questions. So what we're doing now, having explained what Power BI is, we're now looking at what are some of the best practices in creating data visualizations. So answer those 2 questions. Number 1, are we looking at the same data? And number 2, how honestly represented is the data? Many coming in, 12 people. Always want to get past 13. 14 are in. All right, let's have a look at the results. And majority of you have rightly concluded that this is the same data. The axis on the left side is more restricted in the case of number 3. It's the most restricted, and least restricted in the case of number 2. But it's the same data. So majority of you are realizing that that's the same data. And then the question is, which one is most honest? And we have a tie here between numbers 1 and 2. And I think it's a very interesting tie. I think number 2, in a way, is the most honest, but the problem with it is that we don't actually get the true story about the fact that we have growth going on. It could be, it's more obscure to see that we have growth going on. So number 1 actually is adopting something called the 2/3 rule. And Sakib says number 2. Yeah, that's a good question, Prajit. How do we define visually honest? Let me try and address that with this. So would it be fair to say number 1, because we have restricted the axis, you look at it and you think, wow, that's major growth. It's exaggerated. Prajit, would that be fair to say? Number 2 it's kind of obscure because you don't really get the story, because so much of the full 0 to 100 has been included on the axis. And then number 3 is adopting what is known as the, okay, great, thanks, Prajit. It's adopting what is known as the 2/3 principle, which is to say that the mark, the line on the visual should take up about 2/3 of the particular visual pane that we're looking at. So that by doing that, we get both the story, there is growth, but also it's not so exaggerated that you think, wow, it's really amazing growth, which of course, if we look at the full axis, you realize there's really not that much growth going on. Is that okay? All right, so once again, what we're doing here before we get our hands onto Power BI, thanks for the thumbs up, Prajit. What we're doing here is just to look at some of the best principles, best practices, and in terms of using the space on a graph, using the 2/3 principle. Next question, which chart is easier to interpret? Here we're looking at a poll that was done of people in the UK wishing for better weather, and we have a pie chart and we have a bar chart. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether you think the pie chart is a better representation or easier to understand, the bar chart, or do you think they're about the same? So looking at the results that are being presented, which one is easier to interpret? The pie chart, the bar chart, or are they the same? Still on 13. I don't like to stop on 13. Get one more answer. They were at 15. Brilliant. Okay, let's have a look. See what you think. And majority saying the same. Second preferred result is the pie chart and then the bar chart. Okay. By the way, in principle, especially on this one, there is no right answer. It's your own interpretation. And I fully, would you say, you're saying, so since there are fewer elements, so both are the same? Sakib, absolutely right. And particularly, there is a dominant part. So the people saying yes is absolutely dominant. So it's not difficult to see that they're both giving the same message. All right. So let's have a look at another one. What about in this case? Same question. What we're looking at here is favorite Italian foods of children by percentage. I've left the numbers off the chart. Which one of these is easier to interpret? The bar chart, the pie chart, or both? So favorite Italian foods of children. I've got 16 in. Let's have a look to see what you thought. In this case, very different, right? In this case, the majority of you saying the bar chart, with the pie chart coming in almost only 3-to-1 ratio of you saying that one. What is the difference? What is the difference between the previous visualization that we looked at and this one? Because in the previous one, majority of you were quite comfortable with the pie chart, or you said it was the same. What is the difference between the data in those two visualizations? Yeah, Deepak says it means if there are some close data, range data, then the pie is tough to interpret. Absolutely. So if you're in doubt, if you're not sure which to use, the pie chart or the bar chart, what do you think is the safest option? Or the safer option, I should say. So if you're not sure, in the pie chart, the area of the pie is similar. Yeah, correct. That would be my advice. Mahad, Saqib, Padma, use the bar chart. So we're going with the bar chart. So if in doubt, the rule of data visualization is use the bar chart. Of course, if the numbers are on the data, it becomes easier to get into. All right. So next one, if we're trying to understand whether there is a relationship between two variables, which type of chart is a better choice to understand if there is a relationship between variables? A column chart or a scatter chart? So in the column chart, each of the variables is represented by the colored column. So we've got the dark brown and the light brown. With the scatter chart, we would have one variable value being represented on the vertical axis and one on the horizontal axis. Which one do you think is better to describe a relationship, if there is a relationship between the data? The column, the scatter, or the same? Let's see how you've answered. Majority actually saying the column chart. Only a small number saying that the scatter, and in fact, scatter is, if we're looking to see the relationship between variables, and I'll demonstrate this in a moment, we're actually better using a scatter chart. Maybe I should have started with this question. Why do we want to understand the relationship between different variables? What's the purpose of trying to understand if two variables, maybe temperature and ice cream sales, whether there is a relationship, whether they move together in some way? Why would we want to do that? And this is not a Slido question, by the way. This is if you want to use the chat to see how a change in one can make a change in the other. Absolutely. And Deepak, I'm loving that for a prediction. Fantastic, because we can get insight, but what we really want to do is to get actionable insight. We want to be able to say, if we do X, then the result will be Y. So in the example of the scatter charts that we are showing right now, we're seeing the relationship between population with access to clean water and infant mortality per 1,000 of the population. What is the action that would come out? Well, the first question, do you think there is a relationship based on the data between population with access to clean water and infant mortality? Would you say you see that there is a relationship? Or do you think it's totally random and there's no? Yeah, there is a negative correlation, correct. What we see is as population has more access to clean water, infant mortality declines. And as a result of that, it means that, for instance, a development agency could then make an investment decision knowing that it's going to have a positive result. So this is why understanding the relationship between variables is important. Next one, if we're trying to understand the distribution of data, we've done some kind of survey, we're trying to understand where the data sits. Do you think if we've got a very large data set, we should go with a column histogram or a line histogram? Answers pouring in. All right, once we get to our magic cutoff of 14, and majority of you saying use a line histogram, and that is the correct answer. And so the bottom line here is, I'll move actually onto the Power BI demonstration in a moment. The important part to realize here is that when we create data visualizations, how important do you think the choice of chart type is? Would you say the choice of chart type when we're trying to tell a story in the data is 1, not important, or 5, very important? Prajit, Padma, Riam all saying very important. Absolutely right. So we will provide the slides to you. This slide is way too busy overall to present, but this is a little visual which will show, for instance, which can show which types of visuals to use for different types of situation, what you're trying to look at. Are you looking at a comparison? Are we looking at the composition of the data? Are we trying to understand a relationship? Are we trying to understand a... Yes, so I have provided the presentation to a colleague. If either the colleague would send that through to Hannah, or I can do that after the session. Is that okay?
Sure, you can share it with me, Richard, and I'll share it with them all.
Lovely, thank you so much. Okay, in fact,
welcome.
All right, I'll keep going, and then I will I'll send it at the end. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Let's now, before we get onto the hands-on, which unfortunately is going to be hands-on from my side demonstrating, but let's now just quickly talk about color. What do you think? So here we've got, just have a look at these two charts, a little bit small maybe. The first one is overall vehicle production, and the second one is vehicle production per capita. What do you think the effect is of using color in the chart? What is that giving to us? It's giving a very quick interpretation of the differences between them. Yeah. And in fact, what's your takeaway from this chart, showing how the largest one in the chart are different to the others? Absolutely. So this is something I put together a couple of days back, and we're going to recreate in a few moments. What this is doing is looking at, in absolute terms, China, United States, Japan, India, and South Korea had the highest production. China has absolutely. But what do we see in terms of production per capita? It's quite some way down the list, right? So very different picture if we look per capita, and the colors allow us to look at that. And in fact, the choice of colors is also something which needs to take some concern. So the darker colors are less than 4 million. Very nice, Reem. You've gone a level of interpretation deeper than I had thought about. Yeah, absolutely. The darker colors in absolute terms appear rather insignificant. But if we look, for instance, at Slovakia, in terms of production per capita, it's one of those dark colors. So it's this one here, you just wouldn't notice it, right? But it's actually the most. Slovakia in Eastern Europe is the most significant one. Per capita is Japan, Spain, absolutely. Yeah. So bright colors, we need to be careful if we're trying to accentuate, trying to emphasize data, then feel free to use a contrast of dark and light colors, but keep it only for that situation. And also think about colors that make sense in nature. And to test that theory, okay, thank you for that, Hannah. I'll, yeah, so, okay. So to test that question, whether we should use colors that work well together, which do you think of these, which color combination works better? This is data looking at the average minimum temperature by month between 2020 and 2021 in the city of Antwerp in Belgium, which is where I'm joining you from now. Which color combination is more effective? Let's see, Reem says in the chat, let's see what you're thinking. So the majority saying orange and blue. Nobody going for green and brown. Everybody's with this one. Was actually produced using Tableau, which Tableau does give you automatically certain color ranges. Let's see what the rest. So everybody in the chat and everybody is saying the orange and blue. Why I'm agreeing with you, by the way. Why do you think that to be the case? Why is orange and blue more effective? Is it just the way, the aesthetic? The green is merging, right? So it's more difficult to see the difference between them. And also, yeah, exactly. Heat is orange, blue is cold. And this is something that we, coming back to the previous point, just go back to that previous slide. What we said is use colors that are common in nature. And we think of orange, exactly, Reem, we think of orange as being associated with heat, and blue is more like cold, and that's exactly right. So using colors that are associated with nature can be quite effective. Also, it is the best practice to use opposite colors. So you can look at a color wheel. You can find color wheels online if you just Google color wheel, and it will suggest to you those color combinations that work best. And we just saw an example of that with oranges and blues contrasting. And then if we're going between negative numbers and positive numbers, what do we see in the middle? So we saw in this case, we had the blue and we had orange. What do we see in the middle? What kind of colors? It's the best practice is to use very light colors. You can go to white, for instance, white or light. Exactly, Reham. Yeah. To show that we've moved from negative to positive. So if you were looking at a range of, for instance, 8 to 50 in your data, you would stay in just the single color. But if the colors go between negative and positive numbers, then we'll use the full spectrum with light colors representing the midpoint. Is that okay? Any questions before we move on to the demonstration of Power BI? All okay? All good? No questions. Thank you for confirming, Prajit. Okay. All right. I'm going to switch screens and start demonstrating. So just bear with me while I change my screen furniture. Move around a little bit. So that I can demonstrate. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and then I'll share a different screen. Oops. New share and screen number 2. Can everybody see the Power BI? So there's a question. So you're saying yes. Let me just see. There's some questions that came in. Deepak says, let me just see here. Does it mean we can do all of these in Power BI? So Deepak, yes, I would say we absolutely can. I cannot think of a visualization that we could not create in Power BI. And in Power BI, it does have the advantage of, let me just see. So Mahad says yes. That has the advantage of instant refreshes and so on. So actually, let me just swap slides again. I'm going to have to do some screen chopping. So now we're going to turn to the point on Power BI, which I will share. I forgot to mention, by the way. So let me just speak a little for a short moment. If you want to get your hands on Power BI, you can download from this address, which again will be on or if you just Google download Power BI, for instance. So the desktop Power BI that I'm just about to be demonstrating is actually free when you download it. And so you can create the kind of visualizations we're going to be creating using that. That's interesting. Deepak says you've seen a recent migration from Tableau to Power BI. And Deepak, I think that's quite a common trend. I used to be exclusively working with Tableau, but because Microsoft Power BI has really improved as a product and it's integrated into the Office 365 range, I think we're seeing an increasing interest, certainly from my side giving demonstrations. I'm seeing much more demand for Power BI now than I did going back for 4 years or so. Yeah, okay, so let me explain the difference between the two. In fact, in Power BI, in principle, there is a free desktop, which is designed for authoring, for creating reports. The difference comes when we want to actually publish our reports. If you have not paid the subscription, and so for instance, as a minimum, you need a Power BI Pro license, which comes in, it's going to vary by country, but somewhere around $14, $15 per month. You can't actually publish the data, and that means you can't share your report with other colleagues. So in a large organization, you could actually create the visual and you could cut and paste it into a PowerPoint, but that kind of defeats the object of having all of that interactivity and instant refreshes, right? So Mohammed, does that answer the question? What the difference is? That so you have the desktop client that is always free to download, and therefore you can get up to speed and you can practice on it. So a Deepak, I would say with Tableau desktop, you actually need a license number to be able to get in and even use the desktop. You can use Tableau Public, which is always free. All right, but with the downside with Tableau Public is you have to publish your output to the web, so it's designed for public. So Mohammed says, yeah, I'm currently trying to understand whether I should adopt Tableau or Power BI. Mohammed, my advice on that would be, if you're thinking about it from an employment point of view, and don't go out and take me as the perfect person on this, but my view is the trend is towards Power BI. If you're wanting to just take up data visualization as a hobby, Tableau Public or Tableau is a very nice tool, and especially the ability to share in a forum all of the visualizations means that Tableau Public is very nice. In terms of business, as I say, I don't work for Microsoft or so on, but because Microsoft has such a strong relationship with many companies, I think Power BI is the way to go. Is that okay, Mohammed? Yeah, in terms of user friendliness, I've got to say I still believe that the connection to data is in principle a little bit easier in Tableau, or they're very close, and certainly in terms of adapting the changes. And I'll come to that when I demonstrate in just a moment. So let's do that, and I will now come back to sharing the actual Tableau desktop. So I'll change my screen again and back to Tableau. So this, if you would open up Tableau, in fact, let me start from scratch. If you open up Tableau, if you open up Power BI, you have this little icon. So I click on the icon and it opens up. There is a little bit of memory. I've just changed my computer. And in that case, my old computer was running a little bit slow, but it only had 4 gigabytes of RAM. I've now got a machine with 16 gigabytes, and that's working fine. So you'll open up and you're instantly taken. If you look over on the left side, you see that we have 3 visual areas. You have the reporting area, then we have the data area, and we haven't connected to any data yet, so we don't see it. And then we have the model area, which allows us to look at the different data sources that we've connected to and how they have actually joined with each other. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is actually to just find my link. We're going to connect to some data. Throughout this demonstration, I'm going to be connecting to some public data sources. So I'm going to be using Wikipedia data. Just find the URL so that we can get started. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is to connect. I've got too many things on my screens. To make sure I've got the chat. I'm going to connect to some data. And to do that, I will. Okay. What we do to be able to connect to data is you come up within the report area and you can click on Get Data. All right, and when I do that, it brings up, can everybody see the pop-up? I want to make sure everybody's seeing the desktop. Oops. Is everybody seeing, are you seeing the Power BI desktop? I want to make sure I'm sharing the right. You are, lovely. Okay, so I clicked Get Data, and then I have a range of different types of data I can connect to. I can connect to local files, Excel, even finding tables in PDF files. I can connect to databases, SQL Server, MySQL, for instance. I can connect to data I've previously published on the server that sits behind Power BI, Azure, and so on. And then I can, let's go to online services. So for instance, you can connect to data that's sitting in SharePoint, Salesforce, Google Analytics, and so on. I'm going to go to Other, because in Other, I have an option of web-based data. So what this is doing is looking for tables in a particular web page. So let me click on Connect. I'll actually let you see that web page by putting the URL into the chat. So this is a data about vehicle production. So what I do is I put in the URL, I paste that in, and I say OK. And what is now going to happen is that it's going to offer to me all of the tables that it found inside that particular web page. All right. And what we can do is to explore those tables. And there are some items on that web page you probably wouldn't even think of as being tables, but the HTML, the language behind it, has actually read it. So if I would then instead look at this one, this is the one I want. Could you see from the web page where this table is? Can you see the actual table with the web page? Yeah, lovely. Okay, so now if you notice, it's shown me. Yeah, sure, I can show you again. Let me do that. Absolutely. All right. So what I did there was to go to get data, and I get a pop-up of the different data sources that I might want to look at. No problem, Mohammed. And then I can see this is basically all of the types. I was looking for web data, which actually sits in the other category. I select web and I say connect. I then paste in the URL where that data is sitting. I say OK. And then because there are multiple tables, I need to review the different tables, and I'm going to go with this one. Now, what is the problem with the data as it's being displayed? Great. Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks for confirming. I'm going to make the statement that this data at the moment is not very clean. Can anyone see an issue with the data as it's presenting compared with the way it was on the web page? Anyone see? In terms of the column headers, what issue do I have with the column headers? The column headers have not been picked up, right? The column headers should have been country. Right, it's not named. It just says column 1, column 2, column 3. Therefore, at this point, I've got a choice. I can either load the data. That is correct. Thanks, Riham. Yeah. So I can either load the data, but my table is not clean, or I can do something called transform data. Have any of you used Microsoft Power Query? By clicking transform data, I'm going to be taken into the Power Query application. And Power Query in Power BI, it's where the Power part comes, is actually used for cleaning up the data. So there are some nice user interface tools for cleaning up. So one of them is just this button here, use first rows as header. If I click that, then automatically I have cleaned up my headers have now gone into the right place. Other things that I can do in terms of cleaning up my data, the only 2 columns I'm actually interested in are country and 2021. So I'm going to select the first column here and scroll across, select the last. I then right click and I can remove columns. So I only want to focus on those columns that are relevant. I'm going to do the same with the column over on the left side. I don't need that one, so I'm going to right click and remove. A couple of further issues I have here. My country names. What's the issue with my country names? Some of them have a problem in them. Russia, Germany, Uzbekistan. The country, I want a pure country name because in fact they originally were links, you're correct, they've got numbers. What I can do, and again, this is part of the data cleaning process, what I can do is right click on the column header and I can select split column, all right? Similar, you have something similar in Excel, all right? So you can split column and then I will say by delimiter. So I want to choose a particular character and the standard is space. I don't want to use space. I want to use a custom character. I'm going to use the square bracket because that is what creates those numbers all have a square bracket. I say OK. And what that has now done is to split the columns so that Germany now stands alone. So what I can now do, I don't need this country 2 column. I can remove this. And I'll rename it, called them country 1, country 2 because of the split. I will rename that. So I can double click on it to rename it. I'm going to also rename this one, which will be 2021 vehicle production. Okay. And what I can also do is I've got, see what the very biggest number is world. And I want to be able to, if I kept world in, what would happen to my data visualization? Why would that be a problem to have world still in the data? It's misleading. I'm going to have this huge column. Absolutely right. So what I can do is I can click the down arrow, which brings up a filter, and I can search for world, and I can just check that, say OK, and world has now gone. I'm going to do something similar because I have null values in the vehicle production. So I'm going to also apply a filter to take out the null values. All right, so now I think my countries are looking okay, and my vehicle production is looking okay. All right. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Maxim, you're a step ahead of me. So I've taken care of those null values. Now, notice over on the the right side, every time I made a change, it added a new step here. So it actually takes you through. You can investigate all of the changes that we made. So at this stage, if I click here, the columns are still there. And as I go through these changes, I can see the changes until I get to the final position. So what Power Query is doing is running a query in the background. And in fact, if I go to View and check on Advanced Editor, it actually brings up the what's known as M language in Power Query. So that's being written for me in the background. All right. If I'm happy that everything is ready, I go back to Home, click on Close and Apply, which will close the query editor. And if I've done everything right, it's just applying those changes. So it's running, the query editor is making the changes to the data. And then over on now I'm in my visualization area. And in my visualization area, I now have a table of data, which is list of countries by motor vehicle production. And then to look at that data in more detail, I can go to data and I can see my table coming through. There is no join that's happened right now because there's no second table. All right. Now, if I want to visualize my data, I have a range of different visualization types. If I hover over, I've got a stacked bar chart. I've got a stacked column chart. I've got pie charts. I'm going to go with a stacked column chart. And if I click on that, I now have an empty visualization, but I don't have any data. All right. If you remember from the slide we showed earlier, I had my countries on the x-axis, and I'm going to put my vehicle production on the y-axis, and I can drag this across, and I now have that very first visual. Okay, so I'm going a little fast maybe, but I just want you to get a feeling for the tool. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So I'm just going to, to close off, what I'm going to do now is to repeat those same steps, but I'm going to now get the population data, because at the moment we've only got the data about the vehicles, the vehicle production. So I'm going to do the same steps, get data. And I am going to, again, go for some web data, where I connect. And then, Sharon, I believe the recording will be shared. Okay, so I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm going to put in my URL. This time it's about world population data, because I want to work out what is the production per capita. And again, I'll need to explore. And I think from memory, yeah, the first one is the one I want. So I'm just doing exactly the same process. Again, I've got issues. My columns are okay, but country, for instance, it says country dependency, and then I've got world. So I need to transform the data again. So click on transform. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to keep I don't want rank. So I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to remove. And then all of the other columns are not necessary to me. Oops. All of the other columns, let me go back. Heavy finger. So I'm going to click on the columns I don't want, hold Shift, right click, and I'm going to remove columns. Population. Now, what I can also see, if you see it says population, it's got a 1, 2, 3 next to it. So if I would, for instance, go to transform, it says here data type whole number, and it's a whole number is what I want. So that's fine. This one is text. This one is text. So that's all fine. I'll go back to home. What I can also do is, again, I want to get rid of world. So click on the down arrow and find world. And I deselect world. Okay. And I also have issues with my regions. Same thing with the square brackets. So I'm going to, I'm going to right click. I'm going to do transform. Sorry, I'm going to do split. If I can find split, split column, I'm on it by delimiter. Exactly the same. It's with Wikipedia. It's always the bracket there. So I can say, okay, gives me the same thing. So I can get rid of this one, remove, and I'll rename this one region, and I'll rename this one to be country, and based on that, let me have a look at my data, see if there's anything else I might need to change. Are there any funnies in the data? So this is part of the data preparation process. Okay, everything is fine. So once again, I can close and apply. And if everything's gone okay, it's busy, it's loading, so it just takes a few seconds. And once that has loaded, I now have my second data set with region, country, population. All right. Now let's have a look. I've now got two tables, and Power BI has automatically joined them because they both have a field which is called country. All right. So the data is joined, and that means I can do things like what I'm about to do, which is to create a new value because I want to work out what is the vehicle production per head of population. All right, so to do that, I go to new measure. Make sure, and I see my measure popping up over here. And what I now do, it's similar to writing this is what's known as DAX language in Power BI. It's similar to writing a new formula in Excel. So I'm going to call this vehicle production per 1,000 population. Now, and then I have to write a formula, and this is a language that you can learn. It's pretty straightforward. Because I'm writing a measure, I have to actually state an aggregation level. So I'm going to make this average. So I'm going to take my average, and then it offers to me the values I've got in the different tables. So I'm going to select the vehicle production, close off the brackets for that average, and then divide by, and again, average. Select that one, and then I'm going to go with the population. Close that one off, and then I want to multiply it by 1,000. And I can press enter, and now I see my new measure represented over on the side. I can get rid of this one. Now I want to create a new visual to take that data. So I'm going to take the same type, stacked column chart. I'm going to take country. It's gone to the x-axis, which is where I want it. And then I'm going to go to vehicle per 1,000. And hey, Bristow, it's a little bit small. Sorry for that. I've now got my second set of data with Slovakia in the first position. All right. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to open up one that I made earlier, just to show you how I got the color in there. So just bear with me. Okay. So this is the actual visualization I made before, which we demonstrated. So there are a couple of additional things that I've done here. The first one is the colors. What I did there was you can actually create manually a data table by saying enter data. And what I did there was manually, I didn't think of a smarter way of doing it, manually entering, I can show you that, the top 5 producers. So I just said China, United States, Japan, India are the top 5 producers from the top chart. What I can then do is to come to, for a particular visualization, I select it. And what I can do is to click on Format Your Visual. And that gives me the options. For instance, if I come down to columns, that's where I was able to say the colors that I wanted. And then I was able to drag, if I take this one out to show it, if I don't have a legend, then my data is showing blue. If I take top 5 producers, put that into legend, then the color effect comes up. And then the last part that I did is I chose what is known as a slicer visual. So I can create an interactive filter that my users can work with by selecting a slicer visual. And then I would simply say the fields that I want to include on my visual. All right. And so in the cases above, I selected, you can see here, I selected the region if I want to be able to see the data just on a regional level. For Africa, we have South Africa and Morocco, although the order switches when we look per capita, but none of them are in the top 5. Whereas if I look at Asia, I've got China, Japan, India, South Korea, and I've got all 4 of those actually showing in this visual. All right. Any questions? I appreciate I'm going quite fast. I want to give you a flavor of Power BI if you've not used it before. There's one last area I'd like to look at, which is the use of R, or Python for that matter, but the use of R directly inside Power BI. So I'll create a new visual and demonstrate how Python and R can be built into the visual. So I just need my R script. Just in the interest of time, I'm not really going to have a chance to actually go through the script, but enough to say. So in terms of getting data, one of the other things that I can do is, if I go again to get data, if I select once again, oops, click on the upper part, on the lower part, when you do that, it shows up the most common. I want to go to other. And if I go to other, previously I selected web. In this case, what I can actually do is select R script or Python script. If I select R script, connect, the R script or the R program it's running on is actually one on my local machine. I'm going to paste my R script in here. And for those of you that are familiar with R, you have a kind of a form of table is a data frame. So any data frames that I define in my script. So this one is reading the data, which is actually just some X and Y values. Again, I can drop this. Yeah, just some X and Y values. So that's one data frame that's going to be created when I read the data. And then I actually want to see data about, I've built a model in here. I wanted to see details about the R squared, whether the model fits, and also the coefficients. And when I run that script, any data frames that I have created are offered to me as potential outputs. I can select multiple tables. In this case, it's all good and clean, so I can say load. And in the same way as previously, any tables that I've loaded will show over on the right side. So I've now got my tables of coefficients, R squared, and the actual data. And then, for instance, I can create, previously we've been looking at bar charts. I can actually create a table if I click on table, and I can look at my model coefficients, the variable and the model coefficients. And what I can also do, I don't want that total there, so I can go to the formatting. I can go to totals, select values, and that's now there. And ultimately, again, I'll open one that I did earlier. Now, if you're using R for your statistical analysis, you may find that R is easier to work with for interpreting models. So, but again, I want to be able to demonstrate to you the ability to, just loading, second, hold on. Yeah, so this is the one that I made earlier on. So I can actually do my data exploration to understand if there are relationships between the different variables, and then also have my R squared value inside PowerPoint. All right. Now, ultimately, final step, I've created my visualization. I now want to share that with my colleagues. To do that, I click on Publish, and then I'm going to go for Web Share. And these are areas that I have inside my online Power BI. So I say select, that's saying where I want it to go. It says there's already one there. I'll say yes, replace it. So what I'm doing now, going from the visualization on my local machine through to the visualization now on the web. So I'm going to have a look at it. Let me, I'm in the wrong. Hold on, I might need to do that again. Let me just, I've got various versions of me. I need to be logged in to my Power BI. Just bear with me a second. And appreciate that we're going to wrap up at past. Let me just give this one last go. See if that's. No, in that case, it's not going to. I've got some issue because I'd opened up in a browser that didn't have the right login. Let me just, in either case, so what you would then be able to do, you can either keep the visualization private for your colleagues, obviously in a corporate environment, that's what you want to do, but also you have the ability to publish visualizations onto the web as well, if, for instance, you want to use it for publicity or something like that. So I'll just round off with going back to PowerPoint. So hopefully you can see the PowerPoint now. Is that okay? Can you see PowerPoint? And let's just close off. So in summary, what we've done there, we've looked at visualizing the data and why we do that. We looked at some best practices, and then we jumped onto Power BI, where we looked at how to connect to data, how to clean the data. We looked at how we can connect different data sources. We looked at a couple of visual elements, bar charts, and also finally, we looked at how to connect to data or to use either R or Python inside Power BI. All right, so that's everything I wanted to cover, but please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask any questions, and we will get the slides and I think the video to you afterwards.